conversations with a stranger I barely know. Swearing this will be the last, but it probably won't. I got nothing left to lose or use, or do my bad habits lead to white eyes staring into space? And I know I lose control of the things that I say. Yeah, I was looking for a way out, now I can't escape. Nothing happens after two. It's true, my bad habits lead to you. My bad habits lead to you. My bad habits lead to you.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of ERG PowerTalk. I'm your host, Joe Santana. That clip is from the 2020 song Bad Habits, performed by Ed Sheeran. The singer, who just became a father in 2020, is singing about how powerful habits are making it really a struggle for him to escape the grip of his old vices. Now, we might think that being a prisoner of habits is only a problem for those with substance abuse problems, while the rest of us are just the products of good, healthy, conscious daily decisions. But that's simply not true. It's been estimated that on average, we make about 35,000 decisions every single day. And if you don't recall making that many decisions yesterday, it's because 95% of those decisions were made for you by your subconscious. And your subconscious makes those decisions for you using habits. And here's how it works. When we're initially faced with a new decision, we either consciously or unconsciously choose a certain course of action. If we find our responses to the situation satisfying, this activates an association in us that produces an urge to act in the same way when we're faced with the same kind of decision in the future. That urge and our response occurs with no conscious thought, no effort on our part. And that's how a behavior that was first started to attain a particular goal turns into an automatic reflex that we initiate without thought. And this is one of the big reasons why all those dollars that our companies spend on trying to make people more inclusive through unconscious bias training workshops tend to fail. What we're trying to do is we're trying to change a human behavior that's driven mostly by these automatic urges with programs that only train our conscious minds that have little to zero to do with the decisions that we make on a regular basis. So if these one and done training programs don't work, what can we do? Are we just doomed to be trapped behaving according to the urges we've developed when we were children? Is there a better solution? And the good news is that habits can be changed by the right approach. We can literally reprogram them. How? Well, to help us answer that question, we have a special guest today. She is the founder and CEO of a company that helps clients to unleash the power and potential of people from underrepresented groups at work. She holds a master's in education and organizational development and is a graduate of Corporate Coach University. She's also the author of a 5-book series and the host of a monthly online workshop series.
Oh, Joe, I cannot wait to dig into this conversation. I am Maureen, or Mo Berkner Boyt. I'm the founder and head Moxie of the Moxie Exchange and the Everyday Inclusion app.
Thank you for joining us today on ERG PowerTalk.
And Joe, every time you and I have been in conversation, the sparks are flying and the ideas are flying. So really looking forward and really appreciate you having me.
Oh, it's my pleasure, Mo. I really appreciate it. And as you said, I always enjoy speaking to you about a number of topics that are really timely and important today. But just to start us off, tell us a little bit about the journey that motivated you on your current path.
You know, it's funny so Moxie, my entire career has been spent unleashing human potential at work. And Moxie's been around just shy of 13 years. And I remember when I told my mother that I was starting this company, she just laughed and she said, "Oh, honey, this table has been set since second grade." And in second grade, that was the first time that I ran up against my gender identity impacting the way the world saw me. I had a couple of things happen. One of which was we had a class president election in our second grade class. And I looked and it was all boys at the front of the room. And I thought, well, that's not right. Right. And so I threw my name in the hat. And so really it was one of these over time and experiencing my own journey, I was sitting in a room, Joe, I was serving on a board of advisors and sitting in a room with mentors, friends, but we were really having to almost take this organization down to the ground and build it back up, because it was a do or die point. A long, week-long series of meetings, and I left and I was exhausted. And I said, because I jokingly say I was holding up the estrogen in the room. I was the only woman. And I thought something's got to change. And I looked in the mirror and said, well, and so Moxie was actually founded originally as a peer mentoring organization for women. And then we kept pivoting toward this idea of, how do you unleash potential at work? That has not changed at all, but we just kept iterating to solve better for the issue and to solve better for the issue. And I'd say now I'm an accidental tech CEO, because we're using tech to really for frictionless delivery of DEI content and to your point, behavior change, and looping into habit loops. So I think the journey has always been about how we solve this issue, and then the how, morphs over time and need, and how society is changing. It's been fascinating. I had somebody when everything started happening with COVID, and we had just come out with the Everyday Inclusion app. I had a friend who's a surfer, and he said, Mo, when you surf, you can't just stand up when the big wave comes. You already have to be paddling. And he said, you've already been paddling. You've got this solution that really meets this big wave. So long answer, Joe, but that's, this is life's work for sure.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it sounds like another saying that I've heard, which is when opportunity meets preparation, right? So the preparation was there, in terms of the work that you did in the past. So that's wonderful. So, just before we started the program, you were telling me a little bit about how you came up with this name, Moxie, and you said you had a little bit of a story behind that as well. So tell us a little bit about that. You've told us a little bit about how the company, what it did, and how it pivoted and evolved. What was the idea behind Moxie? I love the name, by the way. I just wanted to hear the story.
Yeah, and everyday inclusion is the same. So Moxie, I knew what we were trying to do was create a space and a process that really allowed, and at that point we were gender focused, right? Those that identified as women to really thrive in their careers. And, I sat and I actually have the original journal, Joe, where I'm just talking about this organization and it doesn't have a name yet. And I got in a room with two of the most creative people that I know, and we were just kicking around ideas. And it was actually one of my friends, Tom, who said, yeah, it's like, it's about Moxie. And I was like, oh, like it was just that's it. Because if Moxie is about spirit and spunk and backbone and grit and, all of those things that it takes to thrive in a career. And then exchange, if you think about exchange, it's both something that you do and it's a place where you do it. Right. If you think about like a train exchange or an exchange on the highway, right, so it's where ideas meet, where people meet, right, and where there's this give and take. And then everyday inclusion as the core of what we're doing now. It's a little bit like what you were just talking about. You can't have a one and done program. It's not sticky. They don't work. When you think about cultures of inclusion, it is the things quite literally that you're doing every day. It's those every day, what language am I using around you? Who am I inviting to the meeting? All of those things that are little bitty microaggressions versus micro affirmations versus microaggressions. And not everyday diversity, right? Everyday inclusion. So we're pretty big on names here. And so both of those, we really gave a lot of thought to.
Yeah.
And both of them, we got them. It was like, that's it. That's the name. Yeah.
That's how it tends to happen, right? You get
Yep.
that spark. So, my sense from talking with you and from just looking at the table of contents of your books and different things that you're working on is that you and I are in big agreement on one thing, which is that big permanent change comes from gradually changing small habits. And there are other books out there, Atomic Habits and so forth, on this topic. Years ago, I ran across this interesting story about how Benjamin Franklin used to keep this journal where he would literally ask himself every day how he was performing in
Yes.
certain types of qualities that he wanted to develop in himself as a person. And some of his observations where he noted that when I pay attention to one thing, I seem to slip in another. And it's obviously not something that I can do just by learning about that quality and deciding that's what I'm going to do from here on in. It takes time.
Right.
So he had this journal where he would look every day at how he was performing and different things. And I believe Marshall Goldsmith may have also had a similar journal. And I started doing the same thing many years ago. And so now it's in my iPad, but I used to look at this list of maybe 10 things that I thought I could become better at, or that I thought that I could change or improve in such a way that it would make me better at performing or at how I showed up in certain types of personal and business situations. And I have to tell you, I found that it worked so long as I stuck with it for a certain period of time. So
Yes.
even habits that seemed intractable could be changed if you just stuck with it over a period of time. But that was the key. The key was time. It wasn't just, I decided from now on, I'm going to be this kind of person, or I'm going to behave in this way. And that just by sheer will and by making that decision, the whole world around me changed. But if I decided I'm going to change this one thing, I'm going to change this one thing about how I perform, and I'm going to monitor myself on a daily basis. How am I doing? On a scale of 1 to 10, did I ace it or did I fall short of it? And over time, you would see that incremental improvement until you could drop it off the list because you were now doing it automatically. So I'm a big believer in that. But that is paper, pencil, and then later on the list in an iPad. You've taken it a little further than that. So talk a little bit about your tool and a little bit about how you came up with this idea of doing this. Because I think it's wonderful, again, because I believe that these little nudges and daily support practices create big changes in people. Yeah.
And so this is where I'll walk out a little bit, you and I, on the neuroscience a bit more. I joke and say, I don't know if it's because I grew up in the Midwest and we're practical folk, or the first company that I worked for out of college was manufacturing based. But literally everything that we do with Moxie is practical and actionable. And particularly when you're talking about a big topic like DEI, it can feel really, really nebulous. And instead, when you think about what can people practically do, what are those actions that they can take ongoing? Because we always say that you want to have, for example, the big splash training. Maybe you want to do that one day. We're going to do a celebration of XYZ, and we're going to pull all our folks together and we're going to do some training. That is put your stake in the ground, right? What that is saying is this matters to us. That's statement training, right? This matters to us. It mattered enough for us to put the resources together, right? To have people take time off. That is showing your commitment. That is not going to change your culture. So when you look at just adult learning, let's start there. That we forget almost everything that we sit through in training. If you even think about, trying to remember something that you read in the newspaper a month ago, right? You might remember a tidbit, but that also is not changing your behavior, right? So we're untethered. We are, out in the world, we're busy, our inbox is pinging, the dog just threw up on the carpet, right? Like all the things. And so for us to be able to learn and to change a habit, it's got to be in a nudge, right? Real quick. And then there's the consistency part of it, that if you think about, we always say inclusion is like leading a healthy lifestyle. So leading a healthy lifestyle are a set of choices that I make every day, all day long. How am I managing my stress? How much sleep am I getting? What am I eating, right? All of those things. And I don't eat 7 apples on Saturday and get enough sleep and meditate and say I'm leading a healthy lifestyle. It's little choices all day long, every day. Same thing when you're talking about inclusive cultures, right? Little choices all day long, every day. Then I loved how you started with habit, because one of the things, some of the neuroscience around habit is our brain doesn't take up that much of the mass of our body, but it consumes most of the oxygen. And so we're literally using habits to protect our brain and to protect our thinking. So we had, it's bloody water now, but we were first to market with micro learning unconscious bias, right? Like, let's take this training and let's put it in little tiny, 3-minute segments. And even that, right, 22 segments, you're done with that training over time. You can go back to it, you can do things, but it's not embedded in my everyday. And so I was actually speaking at a conference, Joe, and I walked out and every single person had their phone in their hand already, and they were looking down. And it was literally one of those light bulb moments, like, oh, people are already, we check our phones 96 times a day on average. And I thought, oh my gosh, we just need to break into that habit loop and have a nudge come up once a day, right? That is this everyday consistency, and then provide team leaders, because when you think about changing culture and changing behaviors, what's happening at that team is so critical, right? So giving them tools, right, that they can have in their weekly huddle, right? Just 4 or 5 minutes conversation, right? And then curated content guides for, monthly affinity, and you can earn a badge. And what we say is what we're really doing is creating this rhythm of inclusion, right? That it's woven into everything that's done, with the daily nudges and the weekly plays and the monthly curated content delivered to something. I don't have to log into anything. I don't have to find it. Think about the last time you forgot your phone somewhere. It's like somebody cut off a limb, right? Like, where's my phone? I got to call my phone. Wait, I don't have my phone, right? So we're breaking into that habit loop with little bitty bits of inclusion. And I can also go in and I can search, right? I met somebody, or I'm in a situation, I can go get the content that I need right when I need it, versus HR or DEI is telling me what I need. I know what I need. I know what my team needs. Let's use this tool in the moment. And so we've really sort of disrupted in a positive way, where we're putting control at the individual and team level versus the top down. And it's a pretty cool data on the backside, where what it's allowing ERGs, what it's allowing DEI teams to do is really activate their work across the organization, right? Where individuals are using it, teams are using it, versus them always having to be the go-to person or deliver the training, the resource. And then on the back end, this data is, everything is anonymous and aggregate, but it's tracking, what are people searching for? What screen views are, what parts of the app are they going to? So then there are these data informed insights. So rather than guessing what people need, people are telling you. And interestingly, like, we're seeing things like, tell me how to have that hard conversation. Help me understand ageism. Help me understand generations in the workforce, right? Really interesting meta trends. And then at the company level, I really know at the company level, what are my people telling me I need? So it's it was one of those, again, the light bulb moment of this fits everything, right? The consistency, a tool, breaking into an already existing habit. And it's been really fun hearing the stories of users and how they're using the tool.
That's great. As you were talking about that, at first, I was focusing primarily on the tool's ability to create those nudges that are so important to change habits. But you brought up something else, which is that because people ask for information of the tool, it's almost like you have a constant polling system going on that
100%.
lets you know what it is that people want to know about. So I think that's a value too to ERG leaders and to others, because they're constantly looking for, well, what is it that our members need? Well,
what do they need?
Yeah. So this tool live tells you on a regular basis, this is what members are asking a lot about. There's something else that you mentioned, which I really liked at the beginning. You talked about this training that people do where they say, we're going to have unconscious bias training. We're going to do 4 hours of it, as being statement training, or a way of saying, we, the organization, think that this is really important. And as a result, we're paying to have this half day or full day program where you can all come together. And I think you agree that there's a value to that, but that by itself, it's not going to get you the result that you're looking for, if that result that you want is behavior change.
Right.
So what would you say is the best way to combine those two forces, the 4-hour training and then the ongoing nudges that then reinforce changes in behavior?
Yeah, and I do think that that's it, Joe, it's that combination. And, a lot of organizations, either they aren't large enough or perhaps they don't have the resources, right? So don't feel like it has to be a 4-hour, even if you're doing an hour or an hour and a half, and then saying, and this is what happens after the training, right? So this is what happens after the training. And then you can have your executive team refer back to that training, right? We did this. We're going to do this. Here's one thing that we're taking organizationally and pulling through from that training. And then here's what happens after, right? Here's your individual responsibility. Here's the team responsibility. Here's the ERG responsibility to really lean in and make this come to life, right? To change those cultures. I think all of this is really a big change management initiative, right? So it's change at what's happening. If you think about diversity and equity, Joe, those are really impacted at the leadership and the systems level. I can't change much on equity as a individual contributor, right? But your leaders can say, we're going to do pay assessment. We're going to think about how we're hiring. We're going to think about our promotion process, right? So that needs to happen. Inclusion and belonging, everybody, all day long. And particularly if you're looking at how you change your culture, it is those everyday workplace interactions. What's a gender neutral pronoun? How do we make this social activity inclusive? How do we run this meeting? I'm ordering lunch. How do I make sure that if I've got somebody that is Muslim and somebody that's Hindu, that they have food that is appropriate for them to eat without them having to ask, right? It's the real small things that either are going to feel like death by a million paper cuts, right? Where people are going to say, I'm going to show up and I have to cover and I have to code switch, and I'm the energy and emotional toll that's taking on me all day long, versus, oh my gosh, I feel seen, I feel included, I feel like I belong. And that's, particularly those team choices are so critical.
Yeah, it sounds to me also like, in addition to providing nudges that change behavior, in addition to providing feedback that says, this is what people are asking about, you're taking also friction out of the change. because part of the friction is saying, well, how do I do this? What do I do in this particular situation? The types of food situation that you mentioned, they come up.
Right. I can go do a quick search. I got that information.
And I got that information. So it reinforces your ability to be able to make those changes by just taking friction out of the equation, which is always a good thing. So tell me this, what are some of the ways that, let's say, leaders at different levels of the organization, whether it's the ERG leader or the DEI leader or the CEO or someone in the CEO's team, what are some of the ways that they can use these tools to actually measure what's going on within different parts of the organization? Because that's important too. A lot of times organizations do training and they pay X amount of dollars for the training, but I will bet you that very few could actually sit down and explain in a really concrete way what the ROI or the return on investment on that training was in terms of changing behavior or changing the way people are interacting. How would a tool like this enable them to do it?
Yeah, great question. So they're on the back end, there are a couple of things that were, when we really thought about the data that's being collected and then how an organization can see, like, are we getting traction? Are we seeing change? So the aggregate anonymous part was really important to us. We wanted folks to know that this was a tool that they could use without Big Brother looking over their shoulder, right? There's a lot of blame and shame around this topic. People feel like they should know things. And so we wanted it to be a place where they could go. And quite frankly, we didn't want to wrangle with IT departments either, right? So there's nothing to install, nothing behind a firewall. And I know that I'm using this tool either as a team or so we built in then a couple of different things. One is we built in gamification. We built in gamification because there's some folks that love that, right? It's also a way for people to show that they're up to good, right? So I can earn a badge and I can send that badge to you, Joe. And it says, I thought you'd want to know I earned a favorites badge in the Everyday Inclusion app. Or we're really excited, starting February 1, people are going to be able to earn monthly affinity badges, right? I earned my Black History Month badge. Then, so that's sort of the outwardly facing, okay, I can see because people are actually sending me badges. We can do different gamification challenges, by teams. But on the back end, what is being tracked are, how are people engaging with the tool? So I can look and see by role and by location, are people are people using the app for multiple days? Are they attaining streaks? Are they favoriting content? Are they taking these little completely optional knowledge quests, right? So when you see people engaging, leaning in, using those daily tips, you say, okay, we're starting to see that there's this consistency. And then I've got the data that tells me search and screen so I can come back. Layered on top of all of this are pulse surveys that specifically measure the emotion of inclusion. I feel like I'm included and belong on my team. Right? I feel like I'm included and belong. And this is emoji based because when we think about engagement versus inclusion, we always say, let's say it was your kid we were talking about. Do you want them to feel engaged or do you want them to feel included? You want them to feel included. And inclusion, actually, interesting research from Qualtrics is telling us that, and no surprise, that inclusion is actually the linchpin to engagement. And so when you're measuring that emotion, I know what a red emoji feels like versus a green emoji, right? And in between, at the organizational level, my manager individually, then what you can do is look and layer that and say, we see that we've got this part of the organization that's really engaging with the content, right? This team, this area. And we're actually seeing a trend over time that those feelings of inclusion are going up, right? Or we've got a part of the organization that is not, right, leaning into this at all. And we're seeing either that those levels of inclusion staying the same or going down. And that data, then you can get in, and we say that's people-powered predictive, right? You can get in there and see if you're seeing reds, oranges, yellows, that's giving you data to say, we're about to have very expensive turnover and or a lawsuit. So let's get in there, let's figure out, let's get ahead of that. Or we're seeing all kinds of greens, what's working? Let's get in there and find out those best practices and how can we use those best practices across the organization? Because there's no silver bullet, Joe, when it comes to culture change this big, right? Like you can have training that says, okay, very specifically, we're gonna have triggers around just meetings or just hiring or just cool. That's great, right? We've got that content. But then what about the 42 other choices I have to make today about how I'm going to be inclusive or exclusive? And so it really is, this work is never done. So it's, how are people leaning in to learning? How are people leaning into using and accessing the content and the tools? And then what are those trends over time for inclusion?
Yeah, that's great. It sounds like what it provides is a nice dashboard so that when the light goes on, that's an area where I have to go in and I have to take a close look. Or if it looks really positive, as you put it, then you can turn around and say, let me get in there and delayer that and find out what's working in there, because it's working in my organization. So if it's working in one area, it probably can be ported into other areas of my organization as well.
And I think I can't stress enough how important it is. We call them microcultures, how important the microcultures of teams are. Yeah. Because what's happening on that team, even again, that's some of the search, what's important to us could be very different, even just to a team that's, remote or sitting next to us or wherever it may be, because this is what's in our windshield right now. Right? We have a customer or we have a teammate or we have this situation that for our team is an opportunity for inclusion or exclusion that another team might not have at all.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So I'm going to shift gears a little bit here with you now, Mo, and ask you, how are ERG leaders and groups, whether they're business resource groups or employee resource groups, how are they using this app?
Yeah, which it's so fun. And I have to say, ERG, BRG leaders, keep it up. Your role is so critically important. It always has been, and that got amplified, I feel like, by 100x this last 18 months. So there are a couple of things. So one of the things that we have are inclusion interviews. We ask people from underrepresented groups the same set of questions. What language is inclusive? What do you wish people knew? What do you wish people would stop doing? How can people be an ally? What makes you feel included and like you belong? So we're seeing ERGs Joe, we could, right? I can hook up my phone and screen share, and you can use any of the content in the app, and ERGs are doing that, right? Showing some of these inclusion interviews, and then let's have a conversation about that. No one person speaks for an entire group of people. Here's one person's perspective. What did we learn, right? How can we amplify that? There's also, we have curated content guides. So let's say it is Pride. We've got some firsts and facts around Pride, and then about 10 pieces of content in the app, and then guided discussion questions. So ERGs are really using this instead of having to create their content, right? And having to create, what are we going to do for Pride? Or what are we going to do for AAPI Heritage Month? Or it's ready-made, right? Including those discussion questions. So they can bring folks in and have this whole session, right, around different affinity months. And then there are things like, let's have something on psychological safety, right? Let's use that curated content guide. Other things are really fun in terms of, we've got an ERG that's doing a passport program where people have to, they get stamps for finishing, doing certain things, earning different badges, right? So, and I don't know that it's started yet. There's an organization that is thinking about some friendly competition between two different ERGs and how they're using the app and who can earn the most badges and different, right? So it's really from the really playful fun to let's use this as our content database, right, to inform some of our programming. And I do think that there's an opportunity around some listening circles with executive committees, executive teams, we say that the app is a really nice bridge. It's a really nice bridge to say whether, let's say it's one of those inclusion interviews, right, where you could have that executive conversation, kind of fireside chat, to say, here's what this person is saying. Let us tell you what we're really feeling as a community within this company. And so I think that's, I think that is as much the ability for an executive to use it, but I think ERGs could suggest that, right? If you really want to know what we're feeling and how, because ERGs are the glue right now. They are the glue in terms of creating places, right? The place and the space for different affinity groups to feel included, but then they can also really be the voice, right? Here's what the experience is like for us. And here's some things, and again, people often are like, I don't know how to start this conversation, or I don't know what to say, I don't know what to do. Using the app as the bridge to start that fireside chat, deeper conversation about what the experience is like.
Yeah, that's great. And a lot of ERGs now are actually dedicating more of their time to having conversations like that. In fact, I was interviewing a group not too long ago, and people were talking about how rather than having speakers in meetings, they're actually using the meetings as an opportunity to find out what members think and to address specific issues that members have or opportunities that members have. One of the things I was thinking about also, we were talking earlier about a book that I'm writing that I just am wrapping up. And one of the things I talk about is about the 4 dimensions of the workplace that exist today. And those dimensions are same place, same time, which is where 94% of the workforce was prior to COVID. You have your different place at the same time, which is your, remote meetings and so forth over Zoom or Teams or one of those platforms. Then you also have the same place at different times, which is the old shift work. But more people are now flowing into that as a result of having to maintain a certain amount of control over the number of people that you let into your building. And then you have another 4th place, which is different place and different time. And that's people that are working totally asynchronously. And none of these dimensions is new, except that before 94% of the people were in same place at same time. And now people are flowing into the other 3. So for example, during COVID, 35% of the workforce moved over to remote. From 6%, it went up to 35%. That's gone down a bit, but we're still at 24%. And that may go up again now with the new variant. We also have more people doing shift work than before, again, because we have to control how many people are in a building. And there are tools that are being developed. There's a new tool out there that's being developed to help people who work asynchronously. And it's sort of like Zoom for people who aren't there at the same time. So with all of this going on, you now have organizations that have their workforce distributed across all these different dimensions of work. And we're not even talking about metaverses that Facebook or the former Facebook is now pushing. But you have people distributed across these different dimensions of work now. And to me, it sounds like tools that help poll, that help relate information to people in a timely basis, that nudge people to reinforce new behaviors and so forth. To me, it sounds like it can be very effective, especially now that we have this distributed workforce. What are your thoughts around that?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I think anything that we can do that that creates threads, right, between people, right, and to connect people. So I think it's both. Again, that's some of that looking at the pulse survey data, right? If you're seeing that you've got a part of your workforce that maybe they're the asynchronous, right? They're offsite and they're a different time, and they are not feeling like they're connected. Okay, what are we going to do? How are we going to get in there? How are we going to use some of this content? Let's do a badge sharing competition. Let's do a search competition. Let's do different things. Let's find out. Or as one company says, that data allows us to get in there and double click. Instead of guessing, now we know, let's really dig in and find out what's happening and what those core issues are. So I think that piece is important, but then using anything that you can use that creates that community. And I do think, Joe, it's really important for team leaders, anyone that is a people leader, to understand how fundamentally important inclusion is to their role. It is one of the top skill sets that they need to be thinking about. And how are they, for their part of the organization, no matter if, how they fit into the matrix of, when and where people are working for their team, what are they doing? And again, making that so that the DEI work can be activated across the organization and really acted on at the team and individual level.
Yeah, absolutely. So Mo, how can our listeners get access to the app so they can take it for a test drive if they want to, as well as your books and other programs that you put out there?
Yeah, the very best thing is to reach out to us on our website. You can request a demo, or you can just reach out to me. So I'm always out on LinkedIn. So if we're not connected, and we do a series on there that, Joe, you're going to be on, I can't wait. So I just reach out so that we can get you, because we are a B2B. So we don't have where individuals can just go and download the app and start using it. But if you reach out to me or somebody on the team, we're happy to take you through a demo and get you that access.
That sounds great. And what other resources do you offer that might be helpful, or what resources can you point to that people can go to, read or listen to audio or watch a YouTube program and learn more about this whole idea of nudging in order to create better habits and pulling together an organization and a behavioral development program that can reach across all those different dimensions of work?
Yeah. So on our website, which is the moxieexchange.com, we have a resource section. And in that section, there's an infographic on inclusion nudges. We've got a whole bunch of stuff there. We also have, for the last 2 years, every other week it streams live on YouTube and LinkedIn, our Everyday Inclusion and Belonging series, where we are in conversation with leaders doing this work, right? About what are some of the best practices? What are some things that are working, not working? So those are all on our blog on the site, or you can catch them live on LinkedIn or YouTube every other week. And if you're following either me or the Moxie Exchange, those will pop up on your feed. Because for us, we are really, really committed to, there's so much work to be done. The more we can all link arms and be in conversation like this, Joe, and provide resources, tools. So we're really committed to being a part of adding to that body of work. And I think those are the best ways, is to be in conversation with people and learning what is working.
Absolutely. Mo, thank you again for being on ERG Power Talk. I really appreciate it.
Oh my gosh, Joe, thank you so much. Really, really appreciated it. And keep up the amazing work that y'all are doing.
Thanks, Mo.